Hello everybody, my name is Richard Zoltek and I'll be the instructor for the program. I've moved my AutoCAD icon to the desktop just so that you can see it as I'm interacting with it. I've also downloaded the lesson and made that part of the desktop as well. You will need a fully licensed version of AutoCAD in order to work with the program. I do work in a PC format, not in a Mac format. There's some variations between the two. If I double click on the icon, I'll initiate AutoCAD. You will get a startup menu. If this is the first time interacting with AutoCAD, there are a number of different interfaces that you have to go through to register for it. So do that before the program begins. But for us, it will be initiating onto our screen. Your screen will look slightly different from mine in that I've already had a number of drawings created, and therefore I have the recent documents file. You may have a completely blank screen. However, to initiate a drawing, we're going to all start at the same point. I will be making references to clicking. Single click or select is a single click action with the left mouse key. Double click is a double clicking action with the left mouse key rapidly. And right click is a single click action with the right mouse key. So we're going to select or single click on the arrow right beside the A, and we're going to select the icon which says New. And this will access the AutoCAD template directory. These drawings have an extension of DWT, and what's nice about them is that when we open them, we actually don't open the particular file, we open a copy of it. So there's no chance of us in any way destroying the file that comes with it. If you're working in an office environment, they already have a number of preset AutoCAD files for you to select, and you need to talk to your AutoCAD administrator or office manager to determine which file you'll be working with. For the purposes of this program, we're going to be working with acad.dwt. We click on that, single click again, left mouse key, and then we click on the word Open. The AutoCAD version that we're using is AutoCAD 2020. You can work with this particular series of lessons even if you're on AutoCAD 2016. There's a couple of initial steps that are slightly different, but for the most part, the majority of the lessons you can use any program above that 2016 version. You'll notice my background is gray. Yours may be black. If you'd like to change it to a gray background, I only have it gray because it's easier for you to see. If you'd like to change the background, I'll go through that with you right now. And once you do change it once, it stays with your program, and therefore you don't have to change it again in the future. But let's try this. In this grid area, simply right-click anywhere on your screen. Click once on the word Options at the bottom of your screen. It will generate a menu, an Options menu, and typically the Display tab is the one that's already open. If not, just click on it once. Select the button that says Colors. It's about halfway down on the left column side. And in here you can pick a color. I've selected color 8 for now, just so you can see it, but you can pick any color you want. There will be some interference later on with one of the colors I'll be picking, so I'll be changing it to a white background, just so we can go through this exercise. And then you simply apply and close. So I'm going to click on Apply and Close. I will then close down these menus by clicking on the X in the upper right hand corner, and once again on the Options menu. So this is the general AutoCAD interface. It consists of a number of different items. So at the top we have a menu bar. Now your menu bar, or text menu bar, only has one line in it. We're going to open up a second line because it gives us more variations to the commands. So right above the text information, there's an arrow that points down. Just click on it once. And down near the bottom, second last, you have Show menu bar. Mine says Hide because it's visible. So simply click on the word Show menu bar, and when you do so, you'll have two rows of menus, text menus at the top of your screen. We also have what's referred to as the ribbon. The ribbon contains groupings of commands based on how they're used. So for instance, the first grouping is the Draw menu. So the Draw menu typically draws something new, whether it be a line, a circle, an arc, or so on. And the most commonly used commands are the largest of the icons. And if you just simply move your mouse over top of them, you don't have to click on it. You'll notice that it gives you not only the command name, but a brief description on what it actually does. There are also multiple commands that are not as commonly used in the draw drawer here. So if I click on where it says draw, it shows all the different commands that are also available. The second grouping is the modify menu. And basically the modify menu allows you to adjust or edit what is already on your screen. So for instance, if you have a line or an object on your screen, you can move it or rotate it or mirror it. Now copy seems to be a draw item, but you need something on your screen in order to duplicate it, and that's why it's in the modify menu. Beside that, we have the annotation menu. This adds any sort of notes or dimensions to your drawing, and we'll be covering this at a much later time. It also has some annotation presets that we will be also reviewing in regards to text and dimensioning. Next to that grouping is the layers menu. And this is something that we'll be exploring in detail because it's a very useful function when we're drawing. And it's like drawing on sheets of glass that you can turn on or off or change their order or lock in place. There's all sorts of functionality behind that, and we'll be working with that later on. We're going to skip the block menu and move right on to the properties. Properties allows us to adjust things like line types, line thicknesses, and color properties. And we'll be exploring that at a later time as well. Now, right below that, you'll notice I've got a couple of tabs here. One says Start, one says Drawing 1. This allows us to open multiple files at the same time, and therefore we can copy and paste them between files, work with them simultaneously. So these tabs will be appearing based on how many files you have open. The files that are in here are related to the lower set of icons that are in the upper right hand corner that will either minimize or close out the file. The upper icons in the upper right hand corner minimize or close the actual program. Now if you try to close the program and you haven't saved the file, you'll get some warning statements down here. Simply identifying that this isn't saved, would you like to? But we'll address that at a later time. The central area here is called the drawing editor. Now it basically is virtual space, and it doesn't have a scale. We draw 1 to 1, and we can draw something very, very small or something extremely large. And this allows us to prepare a drawing or prepare an environment for the drawing based on what it is that we're drawing. So for instance, if we're doing a small curb detail in landscaping, we may only need it to have a relatively small area that we're drawing. But if we're doing an entire landscape layout for, let's say, a park, we need a very large area. The upper right hand corner, we're just going to leave for now. It's more of a three-dimensional functionality. We're not going to get involved in that. Immediately at the bottom of the drawing editor is the command prompt. Now we'll be addressing that, and I'll be pointing to that from time to time. It basically tells you what command is being operated at the time and what are some of the options within that command. It's a very useful menu, especially if we're in the middle of an operation and we don't know where we are. And then below that we have layout tabs. This will make much more sense later on. Now if at any time your screen sort of does something different, like I'm going to click on layout 1 and it looks like this, it's because you've accidentally clicked on a layout tab. This is basically our page setup for printing, and it will be once again later on in the program. So if you see something like this on your screen, just go into the tab that's called Model, and this is where we'll be working. And the bottom right hand corner has a series of drawing aids. Again, I'll be dressing them one at a time as it's appropriate. If I just click on the very first one that's blue right now, it's the display of the grid. And you can see just by clicking on it, it toggles on and off. If you move your mouse over top of it, it'll actually show you what it does. In this case, it says display drawing grid is on, but also has a function key, and here the function key is F7. So move your mouse to the center of the screen, and then with your other hand, just click on the F7 function key, which is at the top of your keyboard, and you can see it turns the grid on or off. Just leave it on for now. The last thing I'll refer to is the UCS icon. It simply identifies the grid direction. It has a number of different functions, and again, we'll be addressing that at a later time. But for now, it simply identifies which way the X and Y coordinates are. Now sometimes that terminology, especially for those of us who experience challenges in math, can be a bit worrisome, but don't. Like I say, we'll address that at the appropriate time. So we're going to start. We're going to create a small little drawing on our screen just to work with the interface. So again, I just mentioned the word draw. I'm going to try to use the CAD language as often as I can so you become familiar with it. So drawing a line in this particular case is in the Draw menu, and it's the very first icon. And we're going to click on the line, and then on our screen anywhere. Now, I just clicked on it and nothing happened. I don't see the word line in the command prompt. That's because my mouse was off the menu for a minute. I'm just going to click on it again, and now I see the word line in my command prompt, so I know I'm ready to go. I'm simply going to click on my screen, and the line command will allow me to continue to click on my screen until I finish my drawing. So if I click right at the end and I press enter, it disappears. Now, what's happened here is you'll notice that if your screen is white, if you change the color option to be a white background, this will actually be a black line. But since it's a colored background, it'll actually be white. So don't worry if it looks slightly different. So the line command basically works by clicking on it. We're going to do it again. And then clicking on different points on this grid. You'll notice that there's some notations that are coming up in terms of words and angles. Don't worry about that right now. And we can continue clicking until we're finished. Once we're finished, we simply press enter, and then the line command is over. Now, AutoCAD has a number of different functions that are associated with how we operate. One is if you are reinitiating a command over and over again, rather than going up to that menu each time, we can simply press the enter key. So we've used the line command. We haven't used any other command. So right now, if I press enter on my keyboard, it reinitiates the line command. And this becomes really useful when we're trying to be very efficient with our time in the program. Now I'll press enter again to leave the line command. We have this work. We'd like to save the work. Now, there's a number of different ways of saving. I'm going to go through a process to help you make sure that you don't lose your files, and also identify how CAD interacts with the users and how it saves the files. So we're going to go up right to the top of the menu, and again, there's several different ways of saving, but we'll use this procedure right now. We'll click on that arrow that's next to the A, and you'll notice we have Save and Save As. What's the difference? The very first time we start a drawing, or we work in a drawing, we always want to use Save As. And the reason being is that allows us to place it in a very specific location. And by saving it to a very specific location, we can easily locate that file. So we're going to select Save As, and I'm going to put it right on my desktop here. And let's call this test number 1. Now, what I've actually done is I've clicked on the desktop icon, and I simply clicked inside this window. And by clicking inside the window, it automatically highlights the entire word. So drawing1.dwg is completely highlighted. I don't have to click and drag. I don't have to carefully select drawing 1 and ignore the extension. I can simply start typing, and I'm going to call this test 1. And once I do that, I'm going to select save. Now, I told it to go to the desktop, so let's see where it actually went. I'm going to minimize the program. Now I'm running a couple of desktops. When I minimize the program, again, I clicked on the minimize icon at the very top of the screen. I can then access the actual drawing itself, and there it is. I'm just going to move it to my screen so you can see it. It's called Test 1. Now, if your Windows is displaying the extensions, which is basically the 3-letter or 2-letter identity to what program or software it's associated with, you'll see Test 1 DWG. And by locating it on our desktop, we know exactly where it is. We can always move that at a later time. So I'm going to reinitiate the AutoCAD program itself and open up the screen. And now I'm going to work with the program a bit more. So one of the first modify lessons we have is to use the eraser. The eraser tool is in the modify menu, and it looks like a pencil eraser. It's one of the only colored icons that are on this menu. And I'm going to click on that icon. Now you'll notice that when I do so, there's a little square and the word select objects. Now once again, if you don't see what I see on the screen, press Escape first. I'm going to do that just so you can see it. Press Escape first, and then click on the icon. And you should see the word Erase at the bottom. But you also see the words Select Objects. This is a very important indicator because we can then use multiple ways of selecting objects. So the first one is a direct selection. And direct selection simply means you click right on the object you want to get rid of. So I'm going to click on the line, and it doesn't immediately erase it. It simply shows that I've picked it for the Erase tool. And there I've clicked on the 3 lines. I'm going to press Enter because I'm happy with these lines, and then they'll disappear. Now we can also use another way of erasing. So I'm going to click on the Erase tool, and this time I'm going to use a window selection. And a window selection works from left to right, and you don't click on an object, you create a window or a space that you enclose the objects you want to get rid of. So I'm going to click off the drawing, up above it, and to the left. And then I'm going to move my mouse to the right. Now notice as I enclose an object, it then picks it. So the entire object must be in the window. I've got a couple lines here that cross the window but are not completely enclosed, and they're not selected. But the rest of it is. So then I'm going to click on my second spot. And again, it ghosts all the images that you've picked. And if I'm happy with that, I simply press Enter. The third way I'm going to pick my lines is to use a crossing. So once again, I'll click on the Erase tool. This time I'm going to start on the right side, and I'm going to move my mouse to the left. And notice I don't have to completely enclose it. I just have to cross the line, and it selects it. And you'll see that this box is actually shaded green, whereas the window box was actually shaded blue. So now I've selected everything. I click on my second location and I press Enter. Now at any time, if you erase or do something that is incorrect, there's a number of ways of restoring that. One of which is this arrow at the top of the screen right beside the printer icon, which is the undo icon. So I'm going to click on that once, and it returns the last set of lines that I erased using crossing. I can also type in a command. In this case, it's U, the letter U. Simply type it in and press Enter, and it will return the second set of lines. Now it also adapts the Windows undo function, which is Control and Z. And notice that what Control Z will do is return the third set of lines that I erased. So why did it do it in sequence? Well, the reason it did it in sequence was because I initiated the erase command 3 separate times. Had I erased it all at once, then it would all return at once. So let's try that. But not only are we going to erase it all at once, we're going to use the 3 different methods at the same time. So let's click on the erase command. I'm going to click on the outer lines that I have here. Now I'm not pressing Enter, and I'm simply going to pick an empty spot and create a window. And now I'll select another empty spot and create a crossing. And notice how I picked all of this at one time of using the command, but using 3 separate operations. And now I'll press Enter. So now when I use the undo command, it returns the entire object. So those are what's referred to as selection sets. And anytime you select a command, for instance, I'm just going to click on the Move command. We're not actually going to work with it. Notice it says Select Objects. Well, as soon as you see the word Select Objects or on your cursor, you can click on an object, create a window, or create a crossing. And again, if you're in the middle of a command and you want to end it, simply press the Escape key. So now we're going to save this file, but we're going to use a slightly different technique, and I'll try to explain the actual difference and why we do that. Once again, I can click on the A, or I can just go into the File menu that's at the top of the screen. And this time, instead of Save As, I'm going to select Save. So why are we doing it differently? Once you perform a Save As or you open a file, that location is identified by CAD to where it is. So when I select Save, it's going to replace the file that I already have on my desktop. So I'll click on that. I'm going to minimize the whole program again. So I'm going up to the upper screen and clicking on the Minimize menu. And what you're going to find is this. You have a second file that's there. I'm just going to slide mine over, called Test1 BAK. So what is this one? The test1BAK is the previously saved file. The test1DWG is now the most currently saved file. AutoCAD automatically does a backup. So the more often you save, the more often you have a more recent version as your backup. So if I save every 20 minutes and let's say my DWG file gets corrupt, I've only lost 20 minutes of work. If I save every 3 to 4 hours, my backup file is 3 to 4 hours old. So I want to get into a regular practice of saving my files. I also don't want to double click my files to open CAD. It's a bad practice and it doesn't help you understand where that file structure is. So I'm going to the bottom of my menu and reinitiating CAD. I've saved it and I'm ready for the next steps. Alright, so now we're going to look at some of the other functions that we're going to be practicing almost every single day on every project. One of them is the zoom function. And the zoom tool itself has a number of different ways of using it. The simplest way in this particular case is to type in Z and enter. Now what I'm going to do is, just because I've been working with other files, I'm going to click on the screen, press escape first, and the command prompt is now clear, and I'll type in Z and enter. And you may find that if you're typing things in and they're not responding the way that I'm showing them on the screen, simply press escape once or twice and then the command typically will work very quickly after that. Okay, so I'll type in Z and enter, and you'll notice that we've got a command prompt with all sorts of different words, all center, dynamic, extend, and all that. And each of the words has a colored first letter, in this particular case in blue. And what that means is that this particular command, zoom, has all sorts of different options to it. And the first one we're going to use is window. So I'll type in the letter W and enter. And what that allows us to do is specify a window area. So I'm going to start on the left side and create a window. And the area that I've selected here will more or less fill our screen to its best ability. Now the proportions are going to be slightly out, but that's okay. So I had selected a smaller area, but because it doesn't fill on my screen, it makes sure that whatever I've selected is minimally displayed on my screen, and then it'll display outside of that as well. I can repeat that command. If I press enter again at this point, because I haven't selected another command, I can create another window, and I can keep doing so. And you can see as I'm doing so, it gets smaller and smaller. Now, if I want to revert back to my previous display, I'll simply click on Z enter and A enter, and that's the zoom all command. Now, one of the things that may be different on your screen as you're zooming in and out, the grid may actually change, and that's something we're going to look at in the next lesson. So let's try some other zoom functions. I'll type in Z enter, and I'll zoom in on a tight window here. Now the zoom all will revert back to the outer edges of your drawing, or what's referred to as limits. Limits is again a new terminology we haven't used before. We'll be setting that up on the next project, Z enter, A enter. But if I accidentally zoom out or draw something very, very large and I type in zoom all, it'll expand this window, and this particular drawing will be very small. I also have a dynamic zoom on any mouse that has a wheel. It usually incorporates it right away. So my mouse has a wheel. If I roll my mouse, you can see it zooms in and out of the drawing. And you can do that at any time. Roll your mouse. Now, the advantage to that is that I could perform some of these functions and move in and out of a detailed view to an overall view in order to work with the program. I also have another function with the wheel, and sometimes this is a bit tricky. If I hold down the wheel or press into the wheel, I have a pan control, which will allow me to slide the view across my screen. So let's zoom way out. So I'm rolling it out, and I'll draw some lines out here. There we go. Draw some lines, press enter. Now, for those of you who did not click on the line command, you were just clicking in space. So here I have the drawing. It's slightly larger. If I type in Z enter, A enter, now it zooms to the outer perimeters of the lines that I've just drawn. If I erase those lines, I can use the erase tool, but I'm going to show you another way of erasing the lines. And some of you may have accidentally experienced this. if you don't click on a command and you click on a line, you get these little blue squares and blue lines. And I know for some of you may have experienced that and said, why didn't you tell me that earlier? Well, sometimes playing and trying to figure things out for yourself is a great way of learning. And in this particular case, it was an eventuality I was going to come to. So here, as I click on lines, I've selected them. But what this does is it picks things without being in the middle of a command. And sometimes people are using this technique, picking things and then initiating a command. I find that this is not a very good technique. It's not an efficient technique because it doesn't allow me to do some of the other selection sets like windows and crossings and a couple that we're going to learn the next day. So if you get these blue lines and squares, simply press escape. Then click on the actual command. And here I'm simply going to click on those lines. Press enter. And now type in zoom all. And I'm back to where I was. So zooming in and out using a dynamic zoom with the wheel that's on your mouse, using the pan, all gives us control of our drawing. So I could click on the line command, zoom in on something very fine and pick an object that I want to draw from, roll my mouse outwards, use the pan control to roll it into another position, zoom back into where I want to click on something that was pretty well defined, and so on and so forth. And this requires some coordination. So before we get into the next lesson, you should be able to perform all those functions and be efficient. One of the things you're going to find with the series of lessons, there's 10 in this group, I'm expecting that when we get to the next lesson, you've practiced everything that we've done in the first lesson, and you're very well versed in it. So as we move through the lessons, it's a progression on the learning that you've had in the last lesson. So practice this. This may have taken you a little while, but you do have to review the work and you have to go through it in order to move into the next lesson. So I'm okay with where I am. I'm simply going to save this file. File save. And then I'm going to minimize AutoCAD. I'm going to show you a bit later on our test project for the remaining lessons. So I'm minimizing AutoCAD. You can close yours down. You won't be opening it up anymore. And along with the actual lesson, you had a PDF file. Just double clicked it. You do need Adobe Acrobat Reader to see this. I'm going to zoom out and rotate it into position just so that we can see this. This is going to be our first project file. And it's a very simple post and gate situation. We have a top view, an elevational view. There's some basic dimensions, some annotations, text, some title bubbles here, and we have some actual information to fill into a title block. And this is the first project we're going to work on. It's part of a 3-part series. And let me open that up so you can actually see what's involved in that 3-part series. I'm going to open up the actual drawing itself and identify sort of the parts and pieces of it as we're going to be working with it. So there's our plan and elevation, but we'll also be drawing some sectional views, some detail views, as well as some detailed sectional views. And each one will have some sort of dimensional value as well as text referencing the actual drawing names. And one of the things we're going to learn is how we draw in CAD in a single file format. So all of those drawings that you saw were basically a single file, but what we do in CAD is we create windows. So we've been working in model space for the drawing that we did earlier today, and that's what these are. They're drawn in model space, but we're going to be learning how to work with paper space. Paper space is the terminology that we use for the printed area. This is a page that's ready to go to print, and we actually open up a viewport to see the model within our printable page. So this is part of the lesson set you'll be going through, and we have multiple pages, and each one uses the same sort of technique where we open up what's referred to as a viewport, and then we zoom in on a particular element within that viewport, and we provide all the details. Okay, let me just close that down. I don't need to save this. It's asking me this question because I've changed between viewports. I changed my zoom areas, but I want to maintain the original drawing the way I had opened it. So when it says save changes, I know that I don't want to save anything here. I'm just going to select no. It'll close that file down. The previous file is still tabbed open, so I will close that. And in here it says Save Changes. I hadn't saved this one, so yes, I'll save that one. And then I will close down CAD. And as we work through drawings, you'll notice that they'll appear. And let me just close the program. Well, I hope you were able to follow along today. The video is designed with playback controls. Go through each one of the lessons we learned today step by step. Make sure you fully understand them, and you can basically perform those operations fairly quickly. And as we move on to the next lesson, we'll be incorporating everything that we learned in today's lesson.